Welcome to Conversations with the Planets with Lori Kaufman and Alicia Cielle Heiser, a podcast that roots the wisdom of the stars into our lived experiences here on Earth and weaves the power of diverse healing modalities together with astrology. And today we're going to be talking about tending to your nervous system with astrology and herbs. And we have my good friend on, Senami Morris. So, hi, Senna. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Hello, everyone.
Hi. Do you want to
I'm doing
introduce
well.
yourself a little bit and just like share kind of who you are and
Absolutely.
yeah.
All right, where to start? I would call myself an integrative psychologist. And what that basically means is that I use Western modalities in addition to traditional modalities, combine them and give people options so that they're able to kind of like pick and choose what works for them. Um, and so I have a background in psychology and spiritual psychology, and that is where I kind of operate. And kind of like an offshoot of that, I'd call myself an alchemist. So I make herbal medicines for hair, body, skin, all of that good stuff. Um, what else? I
What
love to
else?
dance. I love to dance, love to cook. And yeah, I guess we'll get into more of, the nitty-gritty of the psychology and the herbalism and ideally the astrology as well. But that's a little bit
Yeah,
about me.
that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And Tsunami and I met last fall. We were both interns at the herb farm in Southern Oregon. They have this
Nice.
herbiculture internship program that is so intense, but also just like an amazing experience. We lived on the farm and we're working on the farm and took all these classes and lived together and just got really close. And I've been wanting to kind of bring in how astrology and herbalism connect for a while. So I'm just excited to have you on to kind of pull those threads together. And then before we really start talking about herbs, I just want to start with a disclaimer that we are not doctors. We are not trained medical providers. We will not be like diagnosing or treating. That's not what we do as herbalists. We support people with healthy lifestyle practices and we help people partner with herbs as living beings and in a relational way to, work on promoting health and vitality. And herbs are not always safe. If you ever take an herb internally and you have weird side effects, stop taking it immediately. If you're on meds or have any diagnosed medical conditions, please work with a healthcare provider before taking herbs internally. Um, and there's a lot of ways to work with herbs that are not internal as well. And so, we'll kind of get into that. But herbs are incredible, powerful beings and they deserve respect. And we are not playing doctor here. So that is our disclaimer. Um, and then just to kind of segue into how astrology and herbalism connect, I really like to think of them through an archetypal lens of these kind of broad archetypal energies that we flow with and that we have. You can think about Venus and the archetype of love and connection. And then you could look at herbs that, bring beauty and love and connection into the world, like rose warming up your heart space and like bringing, aromatic smells. And when we talk about archetypes and correspondences between like the similarities between Venus and Rose, we're not saying it's a one-to-one, like they are exactly the same. Like Rose can also have Mars energy with the thorns, right? Or even Mercury energy with the aromatics of Rose and the way it travels through the air. And so it's more just trying to understand the ways that these different lineages connect and weave together. And we'll be doing that throughout the episode. And, really pulling on the power of the earth and this very terrestrial, like grounded herbal way of working with the energies around us, as well as pulling on the energies of the skies and the celestial bodies and the planets. And it's just really fun to mix them together. Um, yeah. So I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts about kind of how astrology and herbalism merge together, or your philosophy on herbalism?
I'm looking at Lori because I'm like, she wants to say something.
If
Um,
not, I can keep going. I just don't want to like ramble too much.
oh no, I think something that came up for me when you were talking about archetypes was this class that I took called Archetypal Symbolism. And it was a really awesome class. The instructor was a Jungian analyst. So, archetypal symbolism is a Jungian concept. And so, just to give like a brief understanding, or I guess definition of what archetypal symbolism is, and I'm sure this is how it will be unfolding in this conversation with
Mhm.
you two, is like it's the use of images, colors, body parts, shapes, objects that are like universally understood to mean or convey information about the world. And across the board throughout, honestly, all time. That's symbols have been the, what the foundation, essentially, of like how we've been able to build communication with one another and tell stories and evolve as a culture, evolve as human, the human species. So it's interesting because I feel like, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like people think of like archetypes as cliches in a way, but it's like, but I've also heard people say things like, oh, I know this is a cliche, but it's true. And I'm like, it's true, period.
Right.
Because of history and because of consistent proving of these archetypes throughout, different cultures, traditions, and, groups of people. So um
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's also really interesting to see how like archetypes show up in the planets, and in relation to herbs, and in relation to dreamscape, and the psychology and the unconscious and the subconscious. um yeah, and spirituality, it's just so innate in all of those experiences. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think to kind of add to that, I feel like finding archetypes that you really connect with, which is like, why we do so much work with the asteroids too, is actually so important. And then, I don't know too much about the herbalism side of all of this, but like I could absolutely see how leaning into the archetypes of what you're working towards or what you're working on could absolutely show up in things like herbs as well. Like, what did this archetypal being use? Because maybe that would help me. And I wouldn't call it spell work, but every new moon, because I'm ruled by the moon, I do like to light like a little manifestation candle, and I grow a lot of herbs. They're right there. But I grow like parsley and oregano and basil and rosemary and just, peppers, like things that I pick off and eat. But sometimes when a part of the plant will like die in the corner, when I'm lighting my candle for the month and like setting my intentions or my manifestations, or I just kind of use it as an excuse to journal every month and just kind of like set my goals. I love to look up the practices of like what these herbs mean, and like just pick some of the dead ones and sprinkle it on top of my candle. And just like things like that, I feel like can be so powerful for like adding intention, and it's just something that's like already in my house. Like, it's something we already have. Um, and yeah, like I think it's really cool to have just, and something I talk about a lot in general is like having something in the physical that adds to the emotional, like that gives meaning to the emotional, or like have something tangible that you can use that's like, oh yeah, like this is the intention behind this, whether or not it like is a placebo or whatever. Like just having something to set your intention into, I think is so powerful.
That's so beautifully said. And I think, like when I do my altar work, like if I'm trying to bring more healing in, then I might work with some sphere and sundry oil for Asclepius and read the Orphic Hymn
Yeah.
to Asclepius and kind of bring in this deity energy. And then I might take a drop of yarrow tincture that I made and pull in like the healer archetype of Achilles and what is it, Patroclus, who's Achilles' lover, who's like the healer. And then I'll pray to the yarrow tincture to like help bring healing in. And then I'll also invoke my kindly and well ancestors and, ask them to help me bring healing in. And then I have like these celestial energies and these earthly energies and these ancestral energies. And like, it just feels like it's so much more wrapped around me than if I was just working with one energy. And I also want to stress that you can be really creative and intuitive here.
Yeah.
Like archetypes are so broad and there is this universality to it, but it's also something that we're all participating in. And, if you're looking at like yarrow, for example, in the way that the flowers grow as a shield, and then you're looking at how you can use yarrow to be protective and protect yourself with that. And that can be an intuitive thing of just sitting with yarrow and like looking at it. Like with Senami and I, when we were at the herb farm, they were like, we need 2,000 pounds of rosemary, which like rosemary is such a light, airy herb. So
Yeah.
like, and we're not cutting the woody stems, right? So it's like, that's a
No.
lot. It
That's a
smelled
lot.
so good, but we were trimming
Yeah.
rosemary for days.
Yeah.
And for me to just like, I'd be out there and I would take a little bit in my mouth and I'd kind of just, engage with the rosemary, speak with the rosemary. Like that's a big part of my philosophy on herbalism is that plants are living beings. Like I'm an animist, so I see life in everything around me, but absolutely the plants are so full of life and we're in relationship with them. We're not extracting from them. We're not using them. We're not taking from them. We're partnering with them. So when we were harvesting that rosemary, I'm like, eating it, engaging with it, and just like, what can you teach me about rosemary and like about yourself and what you do? And I learned so much about the energetics of that plant just from trimming it for weeks straight.
Yeah.
That's my own intuitive understanding of that plant, not something like books. I love books, but like you don't need to go read a bunch of fancy correspondence books to be doing this work. Just like engaging intuitively with the plants and the stars both can be really, really generative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think something that that we've all kind of mentioned in this space is talking about like the healer patient archetype, which comes up in a variety of ways. Whether it be in, oracle cards, whether it be in herbalism, whether it be in astrology. And there's this quote that I screenshotted when I was in my graduate program, and I'll read it out to y'all because it's pretty cool. It's by Adolf Guggenbull Greg. Jungian an analyst. So he says, the healer and the patient are two aspects of the same. When a person becomes sick, the healer-patient archetype is constellated. The sick man seeks an external healer, but at the same time, the intrapsychic healer is activated. We often refer to this intrapsychic healer in the ill as the healing factor. It is the physician within the patient himself and its healing action that is as great as that of the doctor who appears on the scene externally. Neither wounds nor diseases can heal without the curative action of the inner healer. And I just found that to be so essential in the work that I do, because it's all about empowering people and giving people the resources to be their own healer when they are their own patient, and it's not to replace the medical industry, or to say that seeing a doctor or physician is useless and a waste of money. No, it's more so for one to feel sovereign and feel empowered and feel courageous enough to actually have conversations about health with themselves, but also with professionals, because someone who doesn't know your body will miss things, especially we've heard this across time with, people of color and women and all of this about, going to the doctor and then they miss something or they don't listen to their patient and all of a sudden the person is dead or their baby is dead, or, they have this chronic illness now because someone didn't see it before X, Y, and Z. So I guess like it's a form, it's the healer patient archetype in the way that I like to interact with it seems as though it's like an innate survival component to the human experience. And yeah, in a variety of ways, we've all kind of touched on like the healer patient in each of us, whether it be through like rituals for new moon, or whether it be for, interacting with rosemary, by engaging with it and seeing how your body actively, feels. And so, yeah, that healer patient archetype is like, it's just, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it.
Yeah. And I want to add into that too, like, because my background, I've taught fitness and movement and dance for 12 years now.
Wow.
And so I've had a lot of people come up and ask me questions throughout the years, and like questions that like I don't know why you would ask your Zumba instructor, like this question, you know what I mean? Like things like that.
Yeah.
But it really sent me down a path of, well, what is the answer to that? Or like maybe I should look into that, or maybe I'm being asked that for a reason. And so I, especially back in college when I first started teaching, I would Google a lot of just general nutrition questions, or just like health practices or whatever, just like other things that weren't part of my job, but like for some reason I was getting asked these questions. And the like conclusion that I actually kind of came to was that people just like don't have anyone to talk to and don't know who to ask. And it really like, that's what I realized from it. It was like, oh, like people are just having issues and nobody's listening to them and they just want to talk about it. And I think that's what I like to do a lot with medical astrology and stuff as well. Cause, I'm not here to diagnose people, but like if they're complaining about something, you can often see it in the chart. And it's like, well, maybe minimizing the stress in that area of life is what you need, because everything does come down to stress at the end of the day. And to add to that too, like that Chiron and Cheriklo dynamic, because we just did an episode on Cheriklo and Rhea, who I have both of them really prominent, and Okiro, who's Chiron and Cheriklo's daughter, is also conjunct my sun and Rhea. But I've been really reading a lot into Chiron's journey. My Chiron is not prominent in my chart. It's alone in Leo and it's just opposite my Saturn. That's really all it's doing. But Cheriklo, his wife, is at the exact degree of my Mars, which is 6 degrees away from my ascendant. And Mars feels so prominent for me. And so I have always kind of looked at it like, well, no wonder people are asking me these questions that like I have no business answering. I don't know why people are asking me these questions in the first place, but it's almost like because Chiron is that like wounded healer archetype. And a message that I got a lot a couple years ago was like, the healer needs healing too. The healer also needs somebody to talk to about this stuff. They also, and I think that's why when I make friends who are also healers, I talk to them so much, because I'm like, hey, what's your perspective on this? How do you feel about that? Because it's like so exciting to have other people who like do what I do be friends, like be like in that circle, because otherwise, like it can be so easy to just become a teacher student type of energy. And I see that a lot with like my circus stuff that I teach. because there are no other teachers around. And so even when I try to like host jams or like open training periods, I end up just teaching everybody the whole time because everybody has questions. And so like learning those boundaries of like, yes, I know that I always end up being the teacher, but like I also need time to play. I also need time to do the healing thing and to train, or else I'm going to lose my skill and ability, you know? And like being able to set those boundaries, I think was a big lesson for me and for a lot of other people who end up in these healing modalities, no matter what that modality is. And so, yeah, I mean, that was a lot of things, but I definitely feel like going back to that Chiron energy, like learning how you can use that as like, how can you heal yourself? But also, like, Chiron, your Chiron placement becomes your greatest strength when it stops being your biggest weakness. So, a big thing about what I look like or look at in people's charts with Chiron energy, it's like, well, how can you turn this around and make it a strength instead of letting it kill you, right? Because the archetype of Chiron, like he couldn't heal himself, so ultimately he gave up. So how can
Because
you
he
not give
suffered
up?
so much. Yeah, he was like
Exactly.
he was immortal and chose to die because he was in such pain.
Right. Right. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's that's so interesting to like look at that. Like, how can you lean into that energy and set the boundaries and work with it instead of against it. And I definitely want to do a full episode on Chiron soon anyway,
Yeah,
because he was
that's
an herbalist.
needed. I love
It's
that we're talking
very
about
relevant.
all of these more like female archetype asteroids and
Yeah.
genderqueer archetype asteroids before we even get to like the one asteroid that everyone actually cares about. Because
Right.
like we need to talk about the others. Everyone's always talking about Chiron, but also
I
Chiron
know.
is so important as well.
It's very, yeah, right. Well, and it is your trauma at the end of the day. Like Chiron and Saturn, and they were opposite each other for so many years in the 80s and 90s. So many of us have that, which can be
Mm-hmm.
like daddy
Mm.
issues or issues with authority figures or
Mm-hmm.
issues working for other people. And we were watching that manifest, especially now that all of us have like gone through or are going through currently the Saturn return. I mean, look at how that opposition is screaming. Like everybody's
Mhm.
doing their own things, and these healing modalities and practices are becoming very well known and well practiced. And I think the Uranus Neptune conjunction, which is exact in my chart, it went exact 3 days after I was born, technically, for the first time. And so I think that conjunction had a lot to do generationally with like a lot of people wanting to work for themselves in more spiritual, holistic ways or practices and bringing in different things that like maybe wouldn't have worked for other generations or like wouldn't have worked in the past. Like now the very inventive energy it's coming through, and it's like, how can we use these practices to work with instead of against?
I love that. And really
Yeah.
what's just coming through so strong with everything that both of you just said is like the focus on empowerment, which
Mhm.
Tsunami literally used that word, right? But like
Mhm.
empowering our clients and empowering our students and our friends and each other. And like, how
Mm-hmm.
can we take more? Because at least in the United States, there's such a cultural practice of outsourcing to
Right.
experts, right? You go to the doctor and the doctor's the expert and they are the expert on your body and your health and they tell you what you need to do and you follow their directions
Mm-hmm.
and you don't think for yourself. And like Tsunami said, like, especially in a system of like all of this medical racism, all of this medical sexism, let's not even talk about what it's like for trans people to access healthcare.
Yeah.
It's just like, there's so many ways where when we give our power to other people for our health and our bodies, it can have actually deadly consequences and really terrible, dangerous consequences. And that's so much of, I mean, my MC is in Leo. And so like focusing my
Mhm.
career on empowerment is like, like baked into my chart. But like, that's a big thing for me too, is
Same.
Yeah, that Scorpio, Libra
Yeah,
rising, we got those Leo MCs, but
Yeah.
I
um,
love that.
I think this might be a good place to segue because we really want to talk about like the nervous system and tending to our
Yeah.
nervous system, and especially with Senami's expertise and, having a healthy nervous system, being able to activate your parasympathetic nervous response and like feel
Mhm.
safe in your body, right? Because I mean, an asteroid could hit us at any time. I don't know. Yeah.
Mhm.
Is it an asteroid? Is it a comet? Like some big rock in the sky could hit us at any time. Like we're not actually safe, but we can
Right.
create safety. We can create a felt sense of safety in our bodies where we're able to meet conditions and, tend to
Yeah.
ourselves. And understanding how our
Yes.
nervous systems work is a really, really good avenue into that.
Yeah. Well, and not to be dark too, but like not just that, but anything could happen at any moment, right?
Literally.
So
Yeah.
it's like, why wouldn't you try to be the happiest you can, or like, and I feel like that's something I notice a lot just like in my readings is I spend so much time, especially my tarot readings. I've had a lot of those this week, but I feel like I have so many readings where people come in and I'm like, why aren't you following your passion? And they're like, because stability. And I'm like, why are you being miserable because of a false sense of stability? Like that is something to me that doesn't make sense. Like I could not sit at a desk job anymore. I had to follow what I cared about. And so
Aquarius.
yes, that. Definitely that. Um but it's like why wouldn't you if you could, right? Like why and I feel like I just spend so much of my readings just being like just do it. Just quit your job. Just go for it. Just see what happens. And so many people fight it or hesitate or just show so much fear and I just think there's so much in empowering people to just do what feels right for them and just how can you be the happiest, healthiest version of you in your body and connect with your body in a healthy way instead of disassociating from it and
Yeah.
everything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm. I
Well, how
think
would
like,
you? Oh, no, go ahead.
ooh,
Go.
oh yeah. I was just gonna say, like, I think something that came up for me, kind of
Mhm.
going into the nervous system route, and just like how difficult it can be to feel safe not only in this world, whether it's in
Yeah.
our immediate surrounding or in, you know, 10,000 miles from here, or 5,000 miles from here. It's it's difficult. However, it's possible, and I think it's even more possible when you're able to when you feel in charge, when you feel like uh you are kind of creating that safety from within, even knowing that anything can happen at any moment that could rock your entire world, or rock your
Mm.
foundation. And I think that that's why, the nervous system and why psychology is so important and has been so important, especially within the last few decades, has been because people are recognizing that things can seem okay on the outside, but for whatever reason, internally, they do not feel safe.
Mhm.
And in the presence, rather, in the absence of trauma, so I think that's really
Yeah.
what confuses a lot of people is like, why am I still sad when I have a job? My family is healthy, like I have access to food, I have
Mhm.
my basic needs met. And then other people can be like, oh, I feel happy, and they don't have as much access to basic needs as someone else does. So it's kind of like that dichotomy, that contradiction of
Mhm.
what is happiness, and how can one create happiness from within but also create happiness externally.
Yeah.
um and some people are actually just willing to sacrifice their internal happiness for external happiness, and they're
Mhm.
okay with that, you know? But usually people that interact with me are not okay with internal mourning, you know, like the
Yeah.
constant feeling of like the death and, you know, just not feeling alive on the inside. Um,
Yeah. So many people get stuck in that loop though. It's actually
mhm,
it's so crazy to just see how many people like talk themselves out of following their dreams and
mhm.
doing what's going to ultimately bring them happiness.
Yeah. It's the fear of the unknown that really,
Totally.
like, you know, captures us. And I think like
Mhm.
um just trying to go into the functions of the nervous system so that like we all understand um what the nervous system is actually in charge of, and how it isn't just, it's not, you don't just say like, oh, okay, you know, I'm going to choose to be happy, right? You go through like a bunch of different functions before you even get to, oh, okay, emotional regulation, you
Mhm.
know, and then implementing the tools. So kind of just giving a little, you know, physiology here. Um, Part of the main functions of the nervous system, and this includes the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, which also includes, you know, sympathetic, parasympathetic, enteric, all of these things, you know, somatic, autonomic. Um, and this is all kind of like involving the voluntary actions that we have, the
Mhm.
involuntary actions that we have, you know, focusing energy, or energy focused more on the inside. So like stress, for example, or energy focused on the outside, which looks more like pleasure, rest, you know, digestion, all of that stuff. um, is we have like the nervous system is in charge of our sensory input, integration, motor output, emotional regulation, like I mentioned, control of body functions, cognitive function, and like a bunch of other stuff like communication, signaling, coordination of movement. Like these are all the things that the nervous system is in charge of. And so it's like, I actually even sometimes understand why people are like, um, you know, having a mental illness means that you are like kind of like this rhetoric of you haven't like you're spoiled, you know, because if you are really dealing with something, your emotional well-being would not prevent you from doing stuff. Like someone's physical circumstances prevents them from doing certain things or providing for themselves, but they don't
Yeah.
have time to even consider their emotional satisfaction because they're hustling. You know what I mean?
Right.
And this is very prevalent in a lot of like low to middle class families and, you know, economies and locations. And so it's just like, just I don't know, it's a lot. It's a lot to deal
Yeah.
with. And then you add trauma for some people on top of that. And that's a whole, like that just adds kind of fuel to the fire. Um, and you know, some people it's genetic, some people it's learned, some it's both. And I think the whole purpose of like having this discussion is to kind of to show that there are ways to not only understand how our body works, but there are ways and practices and rituals that we can engage in that can alleviate a lot
Mhm.
of, you know, the pressure that a lot of us are feeling. Um, that which is just like you said, Lori, it comes from stress altogether. Like all of it just
Mhm.
derives from stress because it's, you know, the mind body connection, as we kind of touched on a little bit. Um, and just like how, you know, emotional landscape can totally affect our physical landscape, and
Mhm.
physical landscape can totally affect our emotional landscape, as you know, yeah, we're all dealing with, but especially some more than others. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I think just really understanding how our nervous system is tied into everything in our body. Like it is so interwoven. And, in medical astrology, it's very associated with Mercury and Gemini and this kind of interconnected, like it goes through all of us. And there's
Yeah.
parts of our nervous system that we cannot control, and there's parts of our nervous system that we can control. And those ones that we do have the ability to like actively make decisions about how we're acting, and that can soothe our nervous system, that's really where I think it's powerful to tap in, right? Like there's a reason why breathing exercises are so powerful. And I can say, as someone, I have like deep childhood trauma. Like I never got to have a healthy nervous system. Like from the time I was a tiny, tiny person, I was living in like a traumatizing and stressful environment. And so now as an adult, I'm having to do so much work in therapy and, in different lifestyle, healthful practices and herbalism to retrain my nervous system to not feel like I'm in danger constantly, right? But there are practices available, and even just breathing, right? Before we started recording, Senami led us in just a very short little grounding breathing exercise, and stopping for even 1 minute and slowing down your breath and just being, present with what's there. I can say that's very hard for me as someone with the complex trauma I have. But when you do it, like it does shift the energy. And so being able to find what, couple of practices or herbal allies or whatever really help you when you're elevated and activated can be, again, an incredibly empowering way to, not feel like we're just being pulled along with the tide of the stresses in our lives.
Yeah.
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 Do we want to say anything
Shall we
else
enter
about?
nervines?
Yeah, that's what I was
Oh,
just
okay.
thinking.
Oh my God,
Perfect.
twins.
Do you wanna do you wanna go ahead and
Yeah, I could give a little spiel about nervines. So it's a category of, I guess, like plant medicine. Um, and I mean, there's a bunch of other different categories, right? Like it's basically the herbs and the plants that have an affinity to the nervous system. So they have some form of impact, support, association relationship with the components and the functions of the nervous system that I mentioned earlier. And so, which honestly is just so cool. Like, I love herbs because it's just like, how are you going to tell me that this plant over here can help me physically feel calmer? And then with that being said, that calms my emotional, spiritual, and mental landscape. Like that's beautiful. That's beautiful to me. So I spend a lot of time, especially since Herb Farm, like that's where I got like really infused in not only just the labor of working with herbs, but also integrating herbs into my integrating more herbs into my daily life, and specifically as nervines. As someone who also has a very like complex traumatic childhood, and also just like is constantly feeling like there's a bomb somewhere about to go off and I'm in survival mode and I'm living on the land, like that's just how my brain is wired. So I think nervines are really helpful because it not only it's not a blanket, well, nervines are the blanket statement, right? But we have specificities and specifications of nervines. So like tonics, stimulants, relaxants, hypnotics, sedatives, trustful restorative or truthful restoratives. And yeah, I think what me and Alicia had been talking about, because we came up with like a nice little compact way of talking about nervines, was that not all nervines are calming. Some of them will stimulate you, and I think that people are used to nervines like lavender and mugwort and um other types of like very like hypnotic and sedative herbs that have like a physical action on the body. Like their herbal action is to kind of like slow down function, of the physical body and the mind. But a lot of them um have other abilities, right? Like a lot of like kind of just going into a couple of them, like stimulants, for example. I think those an example of a stimulant, let me in on this because I'm like, stimulants typically are available. I haven't personally tried any stimulants because I don't feel like I'm someone who needs stimulants. Have any of you guys tried stimulants?
Well, I mean, coffee is a nervine stimulant. So, you
I'm like,
know,
I don't be drinking coffee.
yeah. Oh
But
man, I
black
drink some.
tea,
Yeah, black tea is
black tea.
cayenne,
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
say. There's
Yeah.
different ones that just you.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true. That's true.
yeah.
Yeah, I drink a lot of coffee,
Oh,
which
really?
I probably don't need, but I do.
Wow,
I just
I'm
love the
just
taste of it.
surrounded. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one.
And the
I
smell
had,
and the
yeah,
ritual.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
the
I have a whole coffee
smell.
station just right there.
Oh, I love. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Well,
smell for
and I
sure.
think that's such an important point to understand because herbalists just talk about nervines all the time and just use
Mhm.
it as a like replacement for calming. And
Mm,
Yeah.
what nervines are is they're herbs that have action on the nervous system. And many of them are calming,
Mhm.
but many are stimulating.
Mhm.
And then also within that, I think this is a really good place to like talk about the magic of herbalism and that every plant has its own unique profile of how it functions in our body. And so, I would say almost all of us could benefit from some sort of soothing nervine support, given that we all live in the modern world and it's very stressful. But which
yeah.
herb is most supportive for which person is going to depend very much on their personal symptomatic picture, their energetics, what, is important to them. Like I really like to engage with blue vervain. It feels very ancestral to me. Um, so there's different reasons you can work with herbs like that as well. And, when you go to a doctor in an allopathic system, they're going to go through this whole like, did you guys just see a
Yeah,
thumb?
what was that?
Oh, it does that. Yeah.
What is
It's an
that?
update. Yeah.
Okay.
That was weird.
It's like
It was like, I agree.
But when you go to an allopathic doctor, they'll give you this whole, like if I have mono, they're going to treat me the same as everyone else who has mono. But when you go to an herbalist, they're going to really get to that like underlying root symptomatic picture of what's going on specifically with you, which going back to what Lori was saying earlier about her fitness clients just needing someone to talk
Hmm.
to. Like a lot of
Yeah.
times herbalists will be the first person that might like, if you go to a good herbalist, like they should sit down with you for like an hour and be going through your
Mhm.
entire symptomatic picture and like talking about your digestion and your menstruation and your sleep and everything, even if you're just there for your nervous system. And then
Hmm.
finding the right, like maybe it's herbs, maybe it's lifestyle practices, maybe it's both,
Mhm.
but the right things to come in and support you in that in
Yeah.
a personalized way. Which I think is very, very different than allopathic
Yeah.
medicine. And that's where understanding like the nuances of these herbs, which we'll get into in a second, talking about some different examples, but it's really powerful.
Yeah. And leaning into that real quick too, it's like sometimes just like awareness is key. Like
Hmm.
some people are just so unaware of their mind, their body, their trauma, like where things stem from, where things come from. Like so many people just push that stuff down instead of like actually unpacking it or actually like looking at it or trying to work through it. And so I think that's like just I mean going into the whole needing somebody to talk to, I feel like that's what a lot of readings are. That's what a lot of just like any of it. So yeah, like just sometimes being aware of like what it is first is just like first step.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what has been really, what's really a great tool for that is doing research.
Yeah.
Um, going literally Google is your best friend. Well,
Yeah.
to an extent, right?
Think critically
Yeah,
and
depending on what you're
cross-reference
finding.
things and
Right,
cross-reference
right.
things, you know, and there's a
Multiple
lot of
times.
BS about herbs online.
Oh,
So
yeah.
don't just be
Yes.
like, oh, this cures
Not the
cancer, I'm gonna
first
take it.
thing.
Like that's not how herbs work.
No,
No.
no.
Well, that's not
And
how
I mean,
anything works.
right. But you know, the medical industry will try to tell you that's how it works, but
Oh, yeah.
no, it
Well,
does
because
not.
it wants to scare you.
Yeah. And once easy fix, but
Worst case scenario.
yeah.
Herbs don't work, but they will kill you, is what the medical system says. And I'm like, how do they do both?
Right,
If they don't work, how do they kill?
right, right. Like, how did we get there?
Propaganda
Because it's
and
natural.
Yeah,
profit-based medical systems.
right,
Yep.
right. And it's what's really funny about the makeup of like, now we're entering a little bit of a tangent, but I just want to say like a lot of herbs are in pills. Um,
Oh, sure.
so it's interesting how it's like, oh, don't use herbs, they'll kill you. Meanwhile, the very thing that you're prescribing to people have extracts of herbs in them. The herbs that we prescribe in
But
its
they're more
natural form, or not
expensive.
prescribe, but right, more expensive.
And you can patent them. You cannot patent dandelion. It's growing
No,
regardless. Not
yes, it is.
profitable.
Yeah,
No.
honestly.
Well, should we
But
kind of
yeah,
transition into, we wanted to talk about the seven visible planets and some
Mhm.
correspondences, like
yeah,
an herb for each one, some lifestyle practices for each one. And, you know, you can work with what we're
yes.
talking about however you like, but, you know, like I'm in some heavy Saturn years because I have a lot of Pisces placements. And so,
Mm.
you know, engaging with like the Saturnian practices I will say, is a good idea for me where I'm at in my life. So if you're having, you know, that's where like medical astrology, looking at a chart and being like, oh, this person's having issues that are of the nature of Venus, you know, or there's like this Venus imbalance happening. So then how can you bring in either like, you know, there's the law of similars where you're bringing in more Venus energy to help kind of supplement and support it. And then there's also the opposites of maybe you bring in some Mars energy to counteract the Venus energy. So if you know kind of your personal chart or your personal situation, then some of these like different suggestions are going to come, you can fit them into your lifestyle practices in a way that feels good with your astrology.
Mhm.
And so yeah, just kind of starting with Saturn and going through the Chaldean order. um the herb that Senami and I came up with that's very Saturnian as a nervine is hops, or Humulus lupulus. And hops is like, it's a very bitter, drying, cooling herb, which is the energetics of Saturn as well.
Mhm.
It's specific for people with nervous indigestion. It focuses on the nervous system as well as our digestive system and really helps soothe the belly. It promotes sleep, because some herbs are more just sedative, which is calming, but not necessarily sleep inducing unless you yourself are sleepy when you take them. And then some herbs are hypnotic, and some are both, right? But the hypnotic function is the one where it's actually helping you go to sleep. And hops, I definitely take hops to help me sleep. And it's also very antispasmodic and helps us relax. But one warning with it is it's a very depressive herb. You know, we're talking about Saturn here. And so if you're someone who already struggles with depression and low moods, then you might want to
Mhm.
avoid hops. I personally go through depressive phases and I'm able to take hops and it doesn't impact me that much. But when I am depressed, I'm not really engaging with hops then. So that's something to consider, right? Like if you're bringing your nervous system down too much, that can also be an issue.
Right.
Um, yeah. And then for some Saturn practices, we were just saying like encouraging you to slow the fuck down, right? Which sometimes, like, I just tore my ACL. Saturn came in and told me to slow down. So sometimes you choose to slow down and sometimes you don't. And then you get sick and then you're forced to slow down, right? And so if you're able to find ways to bring more space into your life, that can be a way to honor Saturn. Um, Also having healthy boundaries and getting reality checks from friends, checking in with
Mhm.
people. Yeah, do you guys have any thoughts on kind of working with Saturn energy to soothe our nervous system?
Mm, yeah. I mean, I really love the approach of using the weekly calendar.
Mm.
Um
Mm.
so like being able to be like, okay, well, Monday is, you know, moon day, right? So my moon is in Capricorn. What is that kind of, that's how I guess that's how I'm gonna get through to myself on a Monday,
Mhm.
is through that
Mhm.
Capricorn energy.
Mhm.
And well, you know, kind of using that throughout all the days. And so Saturn being Saturday, and just kind of like my I have Aries, right? And my, well, I don't know how to talk like you astrologers, so I'm just
You
gonna
have your
try my
Saturn and
best.
Aries.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Don't worry about it. Say it however. Like, don't
I
worry.
have my Saturn in Aries. And so on Saturdays, I have to leave space for impulsivity, and
Mhm.
leave space for like doing something that makes my inner child feel like somewhat active, but also
Mhm.
like kind of mischievous a little bit. Like I need to create that day and create that space to allow for Saturn to show up
Mhm.
in an Aries way. You know what I mean? And so like kind of
Yeah.
setting my mind up for that on Saturdays allows me to kind of go into the Saturnian energy in a more like passive way,
Mhm.
as opposed to, you know, either not knowing and just kind of like planning things for Saturday and then watching everything burn up into freaking nothing and then being pissed for the entire day. Um, or, you know, not planning anything and then doing something super impulsive that gets me in trouble, you
Mhm.
know? So like just going back to the awareness and, you know, how that has helped me in my personal life with Saturn's energy. Um, and just kind of like orienting myself and orienting my weeks and my days based off of astrology in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and to add to Saturn energy as well, I was just talking to our friend Hannah, who was on a few of our asteroid episodes the other day. And she was talking about I just loved how she worded it because it was something I already knew, but I was like, wow, I love the wording. But she basically was saying the word chronic comes from Chronos, which is Saturn,
Mm-hmm.
and how Saturn rules time. And she was actually relating that back to the 12th house where Saturn finds its joy. Because she made a comment about how chronic things can be very 12th house. And I was like, yeah, I've always thought about chronic things being more of a sixth house issue. And she's like, yeah, but Chronos. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense too. And so I've been thinking a lot about Saturn this week, um, in that more of that sense and how Saturn does rule time. So, is it gonna reward you for the work that you're putting in, or is it going to attack you for
Give you
the
consequences.
right. Yeah, thank you. I like couldn't think of the word
Mars is gonna attack
consequences.
you.
Mars is gonna attack you. Yeah, I know. I was like, I can't think of the right word. But yeah, and she was just saying that, like, if you smoke for 25 years, then you're gonna have the consequences of doing that. But if you're putting in work, then you're going to like hopefully learn the lessons and work through it, and then it won't really be as big of a hit. And you get the rewards from it. And so, yeah, like thinking about Saturn as, it's not going to happen quick. And the areas of life, the houses that you have, your Saturn placement for one, but also Capricorn and Aquarius can show the areas of life that become better with time and
Mhm.
become something that you need to work through. And I really work on breaking down Saturn cycles for people. It's like kind of my niche, I guess, if you want, if you will. When I read charts, I always think back on like when people are going through a Saturn cycle, and I attract a lot of people who are like right in the midst of heavy Saturn transits. Um, but then I look at it as like, okay, well, how can you start laying foundations that are gonna take time, but you will see rewards if you do it during those Saturn transits, um, rather than just not learning the lesson and continuing to push things down because then you're gonna get the Saturn consequence. So, yeah, just
Love
thinking of it
that.
like that. Yeah.
Saturn's not always terrible. She just wants you to work really hard,
Yeah.
but it will be hard. It'll be effortful.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But I always felt, I mean, 28 and 29 were like the two best years of my life, I felt like, when I was like right in the midst of my Saturn return. And granted, I have a very well placed Saturn in a day chart. It's under the beams, it's in my eighth house, it's in Aquarius, it's, it's in its home. So my Saturn return at least was like, it felt almost fairly easy, but I also felt like I went through multiple years of hell, like trying to figure out, who am I? What do I want with my life? What am I doing? I can't continue to do things this way. And it was actually my 28th birthday that I like angry quit my job to become an astrologer full time because couldn't do it anymore. And they were mean to me on my birthday, so that was stupid. But it's one of those things where it's like once you take the leap, Saturn will catch you. It'll reward you, but you have to take the leap and you have to sometimes learn the lesson in the worst possible way. Like you have to push it to an extreme before you can actually realize the lesson that it's trying to teach you in the first place.
Yeah. I will say your Saturn in Aquarius in a day chart might catch you. Someone's like Saturn in Aries in a night chart might not catch them. So it also depends on
Oh,
the dignity of your
absolutely.
Saturn. But
Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I knew we were going to take a long time to talk about Saturn because that's the nature of Saturn. And I just
Yes.
also just as we're talking about archetypes in this episode, I notice whenever I talk about like certain planetary energies or archetypes, like I'll invoke them more and feel them more. I don't know if other people notice that. So like we're talking about Saturn and then we're taking our time with it.
Mhm.
um, but yeah, let's jump into Jupiter.
Mhm.
And so Jupiter, a very Jupiterian nervine herb, is lemon balm or Melissa officinalis. And this is one of my very favorite herbs. It's a mint family herb that if you can get fresh lemon balm, it's like this lemony, delicious, like citronella-y, just
Mhm.
like it's delicious, but even dried lemon balm is still really good. And
Mhm.
it, along with Tulsi basil, I drink a lot in the mornings. And those are herbs that can really they calm you, they soothe you, but they're not really going to put you to sleep. They're good daytime nervine, like soothing nervine teas, but you
Mhm.
could also take it at night and it would still promote rest, but it's not gonna put you to sleep.
Mhm.
It promotes healthy digestion, just like most all mint family plants do. It elevates your mood. Like it feels like this cup of sunshine. So it's really good when you, as
Mm.
opposed to hops, right? Like Jupiter, like it brings you up. Melissa officinalis, like it makes you a lot more elevated.
Mhm.
It's really good for colds and flus, which is also true for most mint family plants are going to soothe your nervous system, help with digestion, and help with colds and flus.
Mhm.
And then lemon balm is also strongly antiviral. It's been shown again, like nothing can cure herpes. We're not trying to cure or treat anything, but lemon balm has been shown to be antiviral against the herpes virus specifically. Like I have a cold sore right now, and I've been putting some lemon balm tincture that I made at the herb farm on it, and it's making it go away.
Mhm.
And then the last thing I'll say about lemon balm is that it influences the thyroid. It's specifically indicated for folks with overactive thyroids. It kind of helps bring it down. But if you have thyroid issues, unless you're working closely with like a well-trained herbalist, I would just recommend you stay away from lemon balm because it does have a function on the thyroid. Yeah, and then the practices for Jupiter is engaging in positive psychology and gratitude practices. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know if you guys have anything to
Yeah.
say about either any of that, but there's Jupiter.
I did want to like a little do a little rundown of like positive psychology real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Please.
just so that people kind of get a feel for what it is, because it's only about like 20 years old, this section of psychology. So it's very new. Um, but I have fallen in love with it. And it's it's an approach to psychology that focuses on improving, or I guess, well, yeah, improving well-being by focusing on your strengths
Hmm.
and kind of reorienting your mind to focus on um, the good things that are happening. Doing, like, I think Alicia mentioned also, one of the great practices underneath positive psychology is gratitude journaling.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's definitely something that is fairly new, but has been very beneficial in in the way that I live my daily life, because of the habits of just like, you know, choosing to be grateful for certain things, writing them down,
Mhm.
being able to be present in my experience in the world. And oftentimes that includes like admiring plants, admiring trees, and being outside in nature.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, just, reorienting your mindset um, to using practices and methodologies that keep you focusing on well-being instead of like your symptomology, and how things are consistently going wrong, which a lot of psychological I guess interventions do. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, well said.
And then going down to Mars, this is a great time to talk about the ways that we can stimulate the nervous system, because working with Mars energy, you're not
Mhm.
necessarily bringing the nervous system down.
No.
And so the herb we chose for that is Camellia sinensis, which is green tea and black tea. They're the same plant, interestingly enough. Green tea, they take the leaves and they cure and roast them. And then with black tea, they cure and roast the leaves and then they ferment and dry them. So it's just a different preparation process. And because of that, green tea is really high in a bunch of phenolic compounds that are very
Mm.
protective for the cells. They protect the cells from, like our body's cells, from deterioration and harm. And black tea has some of those too, but green tea is higher in it. But I just love, you know, herbs that can stimulate our nervous system a little, like wake us up, bring us up, but they're also promoting healing and protecting us as well. And also, green and black tea, they can help get rid of headaches. And then just a really cool first aid thing about these is that they're also very astringent. And so even if you just keep some black tea bags in your first aid kit, that can stop bleeding, right? When my mom got her like some teeth removed, they told her to put black tea bags on the
Oh,
wound. And so that can be an astringent way to stop bleeding.
interesting.
Um, yeah.
Mhm.
And then some kind of Mars practices: exercise, stimulate your nervous system, get all the energy out. Especially, when we activate our parasympathetic nervous system, it's like this whole, you go up and you get to this really elevated place. And then culturally, a lot of us are told, like, don't cry, deal with it, like, hold it in. And then
Mhm.
the energy gets stuck here. And then that can turn into
Mhm.
trauma and unhealthy patterns. Whereas, like, our
Yeah.
ancestors, since time immemorial, have been responding to incredibly stressful situations and processing them, right? Like hunting, and then you're like attacked by a bear and you have to keep going, right? And so our bodies
Mhm.
are very well adapted to going through this whole nervous system response, but you have
Mhm.
to be able to bring yourself back down. And one of the ways to do that is exercise. Like if you've gotten elevated, if you've gotten into this Mars place up here,
Yeah.
move, like get that out of your body so that it's not getting stuck and causing further stress. Um, yeah.
Yeah. I have a lot to say about
I'm
that.
sure you do, Miss Acrobat. Miss Aries moon, Cancer rising.
Yeah, I actually recently have been trying to move less because I have a Fitbit that tracks my movement, and I was looking at it and it was saying like, it tracks your like weekly averages and stuff. And it would be like, oh, 1 day and 15 hours of movement tracked this week. And I would be like, okay, like that That probably cannot be healthy. So I've been trying to take a little bit of a step back on all of that and not push too much. But I actually, funny enough, just had a conversation with a friend last night about human design, which has been, I keep running into people who do human design recently, and it's something I know a little bit about, but not a whole lot. And he was just laughing because he was like, I guess something in the human design was saying that like I love spicy food, but I maybe shouldn't eat spicy foods, which I eat everything at a level 10. So I was like, oh, don't tell me that. And he was like, also, like, black coffee might not be great for you. And I was like, oh, I drink a whole French press every day. Don't tell me that. And he was just like, saying all these things, and he was like, actually, like, cooling foods are better, like you might actually prefer leftovers and things like that. And I just kept laughing the more he was going on and on about all of this. I was like, this is stuff I know, but I like whatever. And I was like, this is so Mars on the ascendant, like Aries moon chart ruler on my MC, like that you're calling me out on this. But yeah, it's just like the overstimulation that I feel like can come with Mars, especially in a day chart, and especially like in its fall, like in that mutual reception on my ascendant, it's retrograde, like it's in a very strong applying aspect to my moon, like it's squaring it. There's so much going on with my Mars, and it just feels like it's so loud all the time. And the only thing that really does like work for me or calms me down is movement. And so I've like very heavily relied on it. Like if anything happens, I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to go take a walk. And then next thing I know, I've walked 30,000 steps and I'm like, I need to go home. Like, what am I doing? And it just, yeah, it's so interesting how that like Mars energy really can play out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think something that came up while you were talking about Mars was this,
Mhm.
self-expression exercises. So like,
Yeah.
Mm.
being able to, someone with a lot of like active Mars energy in your chart, like being able
Mhm.
to spend some time um talking out loud, and like I
Yeah.
don't know if that's something you already do, but I feel yeah,
Alicia
like
gets my 30-minute voice messages.
oh love. Yes,
Well, and
yes.
I was actually no, my podcast. No, I have so many friends that make
We
fun of me for that at
literally
this
have
point.
like our texts are a podcast between us. Like we're like,
And this is
I
how I
love
am
that.
with everyone. It's so bad. But yeah, literally. Well, I was reading this article the other day about how one of the best things you can actually do for your body is walk and talk at the same time. Because walking is already so therapeutic for the body, but having like brain stimulation and like talking is also so good for it. And I noticed that like when I talk on the phone or when I send people a voice note, I do pace around my apartment or I like have to be walking. Like I can't talk and sit. And like I don't know why, but I've been that way since I was a kid. And I just started laughing because whenever I feel off balance, the what I do is I take my phone, I go for a walk, and I just leave people voice messages. And they will be like 30 minutes long and I'll finish one to one person and then just like jump to the next text thread and send this person a 30-minute message.
Yes.
And then my friends who aren't like used to that will be like, I literally my friend the other day was like, "Lori, that's too long." Like, it was like an 18-minute message, and I was like, "I don't know."
That's
Like, did it.
funny.
But,
Yeah.
yeah, like, I feel like talking and walking and, like, having that movement practice and, like, really just being able to, like, externally process, I think is something I talk about a lot too, like, because I am such an external processor, I don't do well if I'm, like, just thinking by myself, like, I either have to be journaling or talking 24/7.
Well, and when you think about the glyph of Mars and like the circle and the arrow
Mhm.
pointing out, like Mars is
Yeah,
so external, it's going out. And so
right.
finding a way, like you don't want to hold that Mars fire in
Yeah.
you. As a Scorpio, I can say it'll burn when you hold on to it. But yeah, you gotta get
Yeah.
it out.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
should we do the sun?
Sure.
Yes.
So for the sun, we did St. John's wort because it has such a
Mhm.
strong association with the sun. It blooms around the summer solstice every year and just has this very solar affinity. Its Latin name is Hypericum perforatum because it has these like if you hold it up to the light, there's these little tiny holes in it. And it's
Mhm.
actually indicated it's like perforated. And it's indicated for
Hmm.
stab wounds, which I think is interesting because it looks like it's been stabbed. But I will say St. John's wort has a big warning for taking internally because it is very strongly activating for the liver. And so if you are on any meds at all, unless you're working very closely with a well-trained herbalist who knows about drug medication interactions, like don't take St. John's wort if you're on medications, and especially if you're on antidepressants or if you've gone off antidepressants recently. Like, don't stop taking your antidepressants and then go on St. John's wort, even though it's indicated
Hmm.
for like lifting your mood, because it can actually make some
Right.
people even more depressed and suicidal. So, don't
Mhm.
take it internally if you're on meds. It definitely is a strong herb. It strongly activates the liver, which is one of the reasons why it does kind of help boost our mood and help with lower, sadder, more depressive mood states because it helps, if your liver's stagnant, you can really struggle with those sorts of more like lower moods as well as anger. And so helping support your liver can really lift your mood. And then St. John's wort just has a huge affinity for the nervous system internally and topically. So if you're one of the people who it's not safe to take internally, it's a great thing to take topically, like some good St. John's wort oil on your muscles. It's antispasmodic, it helps with nerve pain, like it really is a good pain relieving. I've been working with St. John's wort now that I tore my ACL. Um, and then Michael Moore, again, if we're talking about like the indications of different herbs, Michael Moore has said that St. John's wort's really good for people going through difficult life transitions and more
Mm.
like situational. Like he mentions menopause, but you could think of many different ways of just as you're shifting through life and you might be having some nervous system or mood issues, St. John's wort can help you. He says people who are more bipolar or who might have more chronic mood issues, St. John's wort doesn't always help them. So that's something to consider. And I've actually written 2 articles with a lot of research about St. John's wort for my herb school, Artemisia Academy. So I'll put those down in the show notes if you want to go learn more. But it's a really special herb. It's a very powerful herb. Um, and then for practices with the sun, like going outside during the day, like being with the sun,
Mhm.
especially if you have sleep issues, like being out during the
Right.
day and showing your circadian rhythm, like this is what's going on, and like watching
Hmm.
sunrise and sunset, like that can be incredibly regulating for our bodies. Getting vitamin
Yeah.
D as well. And then, and this next exercise I think can segue into Venus as well, but just self-worth and confidence exercises. Like,
Mhm.
Hmm.
I don't know. Yeah, Senna, do you kind of want to talk about that actually? Because I feel like you just know so well about these
Yeah.
practices.
Yeah, I could do, yeah. I think ultimately, like, what has worked for me in terms of self-worth and self-esteem has been kind of training my unconscious mind, which looks like listening to sleep meditations geared around self-worth or
Mhm.
confidence. Um, there's a lot on YouTube, and I will share some also with you guys. I'll give that to Alicia, and Lori to put in the show notes as well if people are interested. Um, yeah, I think that's really helpful because sometimes working on self-worth and confidence during the days is great. And actually, well, yeah, I don't want to talk too much about it because Venus also ties in
Yeah.
really nicely into this. So yeah,
I mean, should we just kind of shift into Venus? I don't know. Do you have anything
yeah.
about the sun,
I
Lori, before we do
Yeah,
that?
I do actually want to say something about the sun. Well, something I've been thinking a lot about lately, because I've been reading a lot of Hellenistic traditional texts, um, is the study of fate and fortune, and how fate is tied to the sun and fortune is tied to the moon. And I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but knowing and understanding that fate is a constant, right? The sun is a constant. You know that the sun is going to rise every day. You know what she's doing, right? Like we know what's going on with the sun, but the moon is the inconsistent. It is the fortune. It's always at a different degree. It's always in a different sign. It's always constantly ebbing and flowing and moving and creating different shapes and movements. And, she always looks different. Whereas the sun, when you start thinking of it as fate, like it's things that are fated for you. It's things that are going to happen no matter what. And yeah, I just think shifting that mindset with the sun into like, okay, like exactly what day the sun is going to shift into the next sign, and exactly, like and I think it's so telling how sun sign astrology is a thing in the first place, because like the sun is the thing that most people know.
Pretty, like if
And
you look outside right now, all I can see is the sun because it's daytime. I don't
right.
even see anything else. Like it was all the
Right.
sun.
Right. And I've been reading Demetra's book as well to like prep for the retreat. And I just was reading the whole section on planets being within the beams, or under the beams of the sun. And that's something I was thinking a lot with my Saturn, because my sun is in detriment in Aquarius, but Saturn is in domicile there. And they technically wouldn't be conjunct because one is 7, almost 8 degrees. My sun is almost 8 degrees. And then my Saturn is 19 degrees. So, they do have like 11 or 12 degree difference, but under the beams, that's a 15-degree orb. And so, having that, like, even just thinking about if you look into the sky, you're gonna see the sun. You're not gonna see any planet that's even near it because the sun is so loud. It's so bright. Um, it kind of just like eclipses everything else. And so, yeah, I think that's um just thinking of the sun as like not only a constant and fate and fated and something that is just going to happen no matter what, but also thinking of it as um the brightness and the like it's unavoidable. It's not ignorable, basically. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
So for Venus, we are talking about catnip or Nepeta cataria. Sorry, I'm probably saying that poorly. I don't speak Latin. This is a really gentle herb, just like Venus tends to be pretty gentle. It's safe for children, but don't use it during pregnancy unless you're getting professional support because it is an emmenagogue, can kind of stimulate movement through the womb, which you don't really want when you have a baby in there. Catnip is really good for restlessness. It's good for nervousness and difficulty sleeping. It is definitely an herb that'll make you a little sleepier. Also really good for indigestion and colds and flus and managing the body's temperature during fevers. Catnip's another mint family plant. So just like I said with lemon balm, mint family plants tend to support the nervous system, digestive system, and fight colds and flus. Catnip's super strongly antimicrobial, and it's just like a really fun herb. Like sometimes in the evening, if I'm like, I don't really want to like smoke any weed or drink any alcohol, but I want to feel like a little loose, like catnip will just make you kind of silly and goofy. And it's just like this like fun little vibey herb to work with. So yeah, that's catnip. And then for Venus, just like we were saying, kind of with the sun, but more like self-love exercises, right? And so looking mirror exercises, naming things you like about yourself, self-affirmation in the mirror. So yeah, that's kind of what we have for Venus.
Yeah, and the tea that you made me for sleepy time or whatever, yeah, I didn't know that catnip was human grade or safe, and it knocks me out. And not much does that. Leaning back into that Mars energy, I also don't sleep.
Can confirm.
I'm definitely a person that only like needs like 5 to 6 hours a night, but then on top of that, like I'm lucky if I get 4 a lot of the time. So I was
Wow.
very impressed by that catnip, actually. letting me sleep.
Mm.
That was very cool.
Any thoughts, Senna, or do we want to move to Mercury?
I think, I mean, we already mentioned like the confidence that comes with Venus through these practices, and specifically the mirror exercises, and being able to kind of see all parts of yourself, and instead of picking the parts that you don't like, showcasing the parts that you do like, and
Mm-hmm.
speaking affirmations onto your body, and speaking blessings onto your soul.
Mm.
Um, Also, what's a really great exercise is like taking pictures of yourself naked, not for anyone to see or anyone to do anything with, but just to feel kind of to recognize your body, one, but two, to feel comfortable seeing your body in ways that aren't poised, seeing it in
Mm-hmm.
its most natural state. Can also work really well with self-confidence and self-worth, as well as self-love.
Mm. That's awesome. Like erotic practices that bring you back to
Exactly.
yourself. Very Venusian.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. And for Mercury, we just kind of put mint family plants. We put lavender and peppermint. We've
Yeah.
already been talking about mint a couple times. One thing I'll add
Mhm.
about the mint family plant and the reason we put them with Mercury is mint family plants tend to be really high in volatile oils, which are the things that make them really smelly and aromatic. And like most aromatic herbs that are like really strongly aromatic are end up being in the mint family. Not always, but a lot of them are. And that's so mercurial because volatile oils, they travel through the air, right? If you've ever made a cup of
Mhm.
peppermint tea, it just like smells so strong. This is actually a
Mhm.
PSA to cover your tea when you're steeping it, because if you don't, then your volatile oils are just going to fly away. And if you keep
Hmm.
them in there, then when you're drinking your tea, you can breathe in the steams. And the
Mhm.
steam is so medicinal. And if you have a cold or a flu, making a herbal steam, even with like your kitchen herbs, which a lot of them are mint family plants, like oregano and rosemary and thyme, like whatever you have,
Mhm.
fresh
Yeah.
herbs from the
Clover.
garden, putting those in a steam, putting a towel over and breathing it in is directly applying those herbal actions to your respiratory system, getting it in here. And if you have an infection in here, like that's where you want to get it. So volatile
Mhm.
oils, they're crazy. They're really cool,
Mhm.
powerful medicine. And that's also kind of our practices is aromatherapy can be an incredible way to soothe your nervous system, and having some lavender essential oil or some soothing smells around you,
Mhm.
as well as journaling, as far as
Yeah.
Mercury, like just getting the words out of your
Yeah.
head can be so soothing.
Talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important too. And I've
Mhm.
I've been finding that more and more lately. Like the more I talk and just get things out, the like better I feel. Even if I'm like not saying anything of importance, it's like sometimes just nice to just get the thoughts out
Absolutely.
and get
Literally.
other people's
Absolutely.
opinions. Yeah,
Yes.
Mhm.
Which that could also be a Venus one too, like just connect with
totally.
others, like being in
Yeah, the
relationship with others.
connection.
Communicate.
Like we are
Yeah.
mammals and our nervous systems co-regulate a lot better when we have other ones around that are calm that can
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
be with.
Well, and so this is I mean, like, this is kind of an unrelated thing, but related. When I started taking over with the shop, I started getting a ton of TikToks about the lack of third places that we
Mm-hmm,
have.
mm-hmm.
And I didn't think that was coincidence that I was getting all of these lack of third place TikToks right around the time when I was taking over a metaphysical shop that I wanted to turn a little bit more into a third place type of energy.
Sorry,
And
what is a third place?
the third place, yeah. So the third
Mhm.
place is, first of all, we have home and we have work.
Mhm.
And or we have home and we have school. Those are our first two places. But back then they used to have third places. Like bowling alleys, the mall, like places that
The
people would
commons in the
go.
medieval era.
Yeah,
Yeah, like places where you can
right.
just exist without having to
And
even,
just go.
especially without having to pay money. Like places where you can
Yes.
just be in community. Like in Latin
Right.
America, the plazas that they have, you know, where you just
Mm-hmm.
are, but you're around others.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like gathering places that you can
Mm-hmm.
just like go exist.
Mm-hmm.
But when I started getting a lot of these TikToks, I started getting a lot of people talking about how third places have become their phones
Hmm.
and people are completely lacking community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another reason why I send people such long voice messages all the time because like it makes me feel connected and I expect not expect, but I like love when they send them back because it's like, yes,
Yeah.
get talking, like share your
Mm-hmm.
feelings, share these things with
Yeah.
me. Like I want to be that for you, so I'm going to show you that it's okay because I'm going to do it to you,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And it's
Right.
like that connection of just constant communication is something that I've really learned when I started doing readings full time professionally. Even when I started teaching fitness classes, I started noticing people would just come up to me after the class and just say things that like kind of didn't even make sense. And I always thought that was so weird. But now I'm like, oh, people are just lacking community, right? Like people just lack
Hmm.
anyone who's going to listen to them.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are so afraid to talk and to like
Yeah.
actually open up. And so, like, I'm going to send you a long voice message, right? Like, I'm going to
Yeah.
create that space. And so, the first thing we did when redecorating the shop was I gutted out the whole middle and we just put a few tables and chairs and my friend is opening a coffee shop in there. She just got approved yesterday. So been
Yay.
a few delays, Mercury retrograde. She's ruled by Mercury, so that wasn't shocking. Got approved on the Kazemi, made so much sense. But yeah, like with the transition of it becoming a coffee shop and becoming a space where we host and hold events, like from free events to actual like learning workshops, like I think that's so important. And, you know, I have a Aquarius stellium in the eighth house, so bringing people together is something that is so important to me and to just like I think it's just so like needed and just, you know, that communication is so lacking for a lot
Yeah.
of people. And so creating third spaces, creating space where people feel safe and comfortable to share things
Mm-hmm.
even that have no value because it might
Yeah.
have value, you know. Sometimes you say something that means something to somebody else and you didn't even realize it. So like,
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so last planet was the moon.
Mhm.
And the herb for that we chose is milky oats or Avena
Yes.
sativa. And this is like oats are one of my favorite herbs, honestly. Like they're so prolific, they're so gentle and tonic
Yeah.
and nutritive, and especially
Mm-hmm.
milky oats is like in the spring when the oaks like they get these oats, not oaks. Oats get these like is like latex white sap. Like you can go and you can pinch them and
Mm.
you squeeze them and this like white sap comes out. And that latex is so nourishing and tonifying
Mm-hmm.
for your nervous system. It literally soothes frayed nerves and like helps, you know, like when we've been in a
Mhm.
period of prolonged stress, being able to come back and rebuild our frayed
Yeah.
nervous system. And so
Yeah.
getting the oats in their milky stage, highly recommend tincturing it so then you have it year round. But
Mhm.
if you do have dried either milky oat tops or oat straw, they also make a really good like nutritive tonic tea that just generally has an affinity for the nervous system, but the milky phase is the best. Um, it's antispasmodic. This is very different than a lot of the more like bitter sedating herbs like vervain or hops or skullcap.
Mhm.
This is not bitter, it's more nourishing. So depending on your symptomatic, you know, picture, if you're someone who runs really cold and dry already, then you might not want more bitter herbs and something like oats might actually be better for your system.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's good for recovery, but also just good in acute stressful situations. Good to just I take milky oat tincture literally every day. Like it's just good to have it in your life. And I also wrote a blog post about this herb, so I'll put that in the show notes. And our practices for the moon that we wrote are to sleep, cry, and eat, and just like let your body exist. I'm in a
Literally.
Cancer perfection month. Um,
That's
my
fun.
Cancer perfection month started the day I tore my ACL, and my moon is in the sixth house conjunct Saturn, and Saturn was conjunct my moon by transit when I tore my ACL. So like the timing of it all, like I enter, this like Cancer perfection month, and my sixth house moon
Mm,
is immediately activated. And I've been sleeping and crying and eating
Interesting.
a lot. And also wearing a lot more
Mhm.
sweats, which I think is funny because Lori and I were talking about how I tend to like dress up and make myself cute for the podcasts because I'm a Libra rising, and then she's always in sweats because she's a Cancer rising. But now I'm in my
yep.
Cancer month and I'm like literally wearing sweatpants and like,
I
but
love
just
that.
I'm
like
in my
tending to
PJs.
your body's needs is so Cancer. And honestly,
Absolutely.
like the basics for our nervous system,
Yeah.
like eating a good breakfast, things like that, like it does build up. So
Yeah. I also would
Yeah.
like to add with the milky oats is that it's kind of Alicia just said it. The nerve damage aspect. It's a tropho-restorative. So
yeah.
it helps come in and, soothe damaged nerves. And I think what's also really awesome about it is that in this day and age where we're all suffering from burnout a lot more often than
Mhm.
usual, and it's become a norm for a lot of us, milky oats is a great ally for that.
Mm.
It's great for like if you're feeling like your battery's dead, whether it's socially, whether it's like uh emotionally, mentally. Milky oats is
Yeah.
also really great for that. Um yeah, like
Yeah.
especially if you are having trouble sleeping but you're really tired. That's also a really good one.
Yeah.
Um yeah,
Love that. Yeah,
that's kind of what I
trophorestoratives
yeah.
build the nervous system. Like most of the other herbs we
Right.
talked about don't like rebuild it. And this one,
No.
Mhm.
along with skullcap, which we didn't talk about, those are ones that literally like rebuild your nervous system, which is pretty dang cool.
Yeah.
St.
Well, and
John's
that's
wort as well.
so,
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
yeah,
Hmm.
that's so moon-like anyway, just to have phases and
Mm,
to like,
Yeah.
I think that's something as being a person ruled by my moon, which is so loud and angular. Um, I think about that a lot is that everything really is a phase. And like, I think for me, when I started really leaning into my moon as a practice, and like allowing myself, Aries energy to like have the impulses that I'm gonna have, right? And then just like acting on
Hmm.
them. So like when I quit my job, the thing that was most important to me was that I wanted to intuitively eat. I wanted to intuitively sleep. I hate trying to force myself to sleep so because I have to wake up early. Um because I won't sleep and then I'm up all night.
Hmm.
And just things like that where it's like when I really leaned into being an Aries moon and instead of being frustrated by it, I allow it to be, like if I'm sad, it's probably only going to last 20 minutes. So I just let myself cry or scream or whatever it is, like cuz
Yeah.
sometimes like Aries just has to have an outburst and it just has
Hmm.
to like do whatever it's going to do. And when I stopped trying to control those things and just was like, you know what? I'm really angry for no reason right now. Like, I let myself just be angry. And then I'm like, oh, okay, what's that over there? And it's like, it literally is just over in 5 minutes. But that's it. Like that moon energy of like, of fortune, of movement, of,
Hmm.
like it is.
Restoration, yeah.
Right. Like
mm-hmm.
nothing
Hmm.
lasts very long with the moon. And
Hmm.
I remind myself of that a lot. Like if I'm going through something difficult, I'm like, well, this emotion will be over soon. This thing will be
Hmm.
over soon. It'll change. But then, when you're going through really good things too, sometimes it's nice to be like, okay, like I should enjoy this while it's happening because like this could also change and it will because everything
Hmm.
does.
Mhm.
And really just, yeah, that movement, the like cyclical nature of like just how the moon is so fast.
Yeah.
And then adding the Aries energy for me makes it faster. So
Yeah, zoom, zoom.
zoom.
Zoom, zoom.
It's like the most Aries thing.
Yeah, it really is.
I
It's all
love
the
that.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Awesome. Well,
Mhm.
Senami has lost all of their daylight, and we have kept them
I
longer
saw
than we were
that.
planning
Yeah.
to. The sun
You're
has
slowly
set.
The
As
disappearing.
sun,
we talk about the
like,
new, like it's like the moon, and now like the nighttime is the
yes.
descending light.
Oh
Yes.
my gosh, I love that
I know. It
actually.
got so dark
The
so fast.
I know. It's like the moon is like, I'm here. You guys are talking about me. Might as well come
Okay.
through. Yeah.
I
Literally.
love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah. This was
Sanami,
awesome.
you had mentioned some like what was the 7-day meditation you were
Oh,
talking
yes.
about?
Mhm.
Yes. So there's I follow these people on YouTube, the mindful movement,
Mm.
and they have a bunch of meditations and yoga practices and embodiment practices in general, and they have a really great self-confidence and courage meditation that I really do enjoy.
Mhm.
And what I typically do, like if it's something I want to invest my time into and put intention into, I'll listen to it for like a 7-day period. Sometimes I'll listen to it up to a 21-day period. And it'll be just consistently over time. And you'll see the actual changes in, the way that you show
Yeah.
up. And it's not something that you would recognize immediately, but it's something that you notice when it comes up, in your
Mhm.
behavior, that you're like, oh, that courage meditation actually worked. Like this would have taken way more effort from me prior to this,
Yeah.
prior to
Hmm.
doing the meditation. So yeah, and then I also just strongly believe in like subconscious rewiring and unconscious
Mhm.
rewiring.
Hmm.
So I spent a lot of time listening to like sleep meditations and sound baths. So I'll share some for sure that have been
Yeah.
helpful and geared towards courage. The courage to live, the courage to be empowered by self,
Yeah.
encouraging you to be empowered by others, empowered by plants because they show so much courage in
Hmm.
the eons that they've been here, and their continuous functionality to keep us alive, but not just us, all living beings on this earth.
Yeah.
So
The
yeah,
earth
courage
itself
is
as
very,
well.
the earth itself, yeah, the earth
Literally.
itself, living being of courage and
Yeah.
empowerment. So yeah, I thought
I
that would
love
be
that.
awesome.
I'm really excited for that. My progressed moon is moving into Aries in like 3 days. So this is really good timing actually
Mm.
to I feel like a little courage, subconscious rewiring is exactly what
Yeah.
I need.
Oh,
Love
lovely.
that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, do you want to share a little about what you have going on and how people can engage with you, Sanami?
Absolutely. So you can find me and my Crown Therapy family on Instagram at Crown Therapy _. That is where it, now that I know that this word of the like third place, that's what
Yeah.
Crown Therapy is. It's a space for community, a space for
Mm,
empowerment, a space for learning about herbalism, learning about integrative medicine, having conversations about real life stuff, um, that that we all deal with, but not in a way from like, not from an academic perspective, but just from a human perspective. So yeah, come on down, come hang out. I also hand make hair, body, and skin elixirs, oils,
Mm.
balms, and they are purchased. You can purchase them through Crown Therapy as well. And I'm currently working on establishing like my signature uh I guess products and offerings to people. So I've been spending a lot of time in my kitchen, in my apothecary, getting really creative and really excited about sharing with the world. So yeah, that's where you can find me. That's where I usually am.
Absolutely.
I love
Yeah.
that. And that was one of the best parts about the herb farm internship was we had this whole medicine shed and they gave us
Yeah.
like a ton of liquor, a ton of olive oil, a ton of glycerides. We had medicine making
Yeah.
classes. We were surrounded by all these like plants growing around us and we just went, it's like little Hogwarts potion, like going in and making our
Yeah.
little concoctions. And so,
So
yeah,
fun.
Senami, I'm just so excited to see the things you come up with because learning how to make medicine at the herb farm was, yeah, a really cool
Special.
experience to share. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. That's so
yeah.
cool.
Mhm.
What about you, Lori? What do you have going on?
Oh, everything. Um, yeah, we had our grand reopening with the shop
Mm.
about a week and a half ago. So I've been there every single day. We had different events that I hosted every single night for the first week. Plus, I did a sound bath one of the mornings. And so like I've literally just been there 24/7 and I've been offering readings there. Um, which a lot of people have been in and out because it's a small neighborhood with a lot of hype for things like that. And so it's been really beautiful. A lot of people showed up and came out. And like I said, my friend who's doing the coffee and plant shop in there, she is she's her stuff with the health department got a little bit delayed because we had tornado warnings the entire day of our first day reopen. It's been a whole thing. So, yeah, she ended up having to reschedule, but now everything's back on track now that we actually got no tornadoes, but it was a whole mess. Yeah, so I've just been trying to find footing and host things and get people in there. And yeah, this is my first day away from the shop um in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So yeah, I'm finally starting to make time for myself again. Now that we're like up and running, basically. But otherwise, I've been doing a lot of readings. I've been doing a lot of events and parties. If you're local, come check us out. We're in Northside. It's the Mindful Nest. If you're not local and you need a reading or anything, Instagram is definitely just the best way to catch me. And I think I don't really have much going on besides that right now. So.
It's a lot going on. So, if you had more,
It's a
you'd
lot.
be like, I don't
It's a
even know
lot
how you're doing
happening.
it.
I'm a little scatterbrained. I'm sending people 30-minute messages. That's how I'm doing. You have
That's
fallen victim to
hilarious.
those.
I love them. Like making my breakfast with Lori. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I picture everyone listens to them. Oh. And what about you?
Um, I just opened my books, which is very exciting because I was
Yay.
taking the winter off
Mm.
to ski until I tore my knee in half, which also another astrological thing about that is that Saturn rules my fifth house of hobbies and sports, and I hurt my knee skiing. Like
Damn.
too literal. But my books are now open. I offer asteroid astrology readings where we
Mm-hmm.
go through like the most prominent asteroids in your birth chart and the myths that you live out. And we talk about the way that like story and myth and asteroids show up in your life, which is really
Mm-hmm.
exciting. I have an herbal astrology reading where we talk about just like different health and lifestyle priorities of yours and look at the astrology and the herbal expertise that I've, gained through studying at Artemisia Academy and the Herb Farm and just kind of share different suggestions and things to work on herbally through your
Mhm.
astrology. And then I also have just a general topic specific astrology reading. So if you want to talk about career or money or better understanding yourself, and I do that in a mini format so you can get an affordable 30-minute reading. And then I also do 60 and 90-minute readings if you want to talk about more things. Um, And then I also handcraft personalized herbal teas for folks. Lori mentioned that when we were talking about catnip, that I made her a sleepy
They're
tea.
great.
And so if you want a tea to help support your digestion, help promote sleep, help, I know a lot about nervines because I'm a very nervous person. So like I can make you just a soothing tea. And so all of that's on my website. And yeah, the links to all of our websites and Instagrams and things will be down in the show notes.
Mhm.
So yeah, thanks everyone for listening and for joining us. And
Yeah.
yeah. Now we just have to
Thank
figure out how to
you.
stop recording. There it is. Bye, guys.
Bye.